Ladies and gentlemen, there comes a moment in life when you realize that pursuing someone who does not reciprocate your effort is not a testament to love, but a slow surrender of your own value. For years, you may have believed that persistence, attention, and sacrifice were the currency of connection, that by giving more, caring more, and chasing more, you could secure their presence in your life. But human relationships are not transactions, and emotions cannot be coerced. The truth is far more unsettling and far more liberating. Sometimes stepping back is the act of courage, the act of wisdom, and the first step toward reclaiming yourself. Picture it: every day, every gesture, every word you direct toward them has been a message, not just of affection, but of dependency. And for a while, you may not notice it. The effort feels natural, even noble. You tell yourself, I am loyal, I am committed, I am loving. And yet beneath that conviction lies a subtle erosion of self-respect, a quiet surrender to the imbalance that has been forming without your conscious acknowledgement. You are giving more than you are receiving, and slowly, invisibly, your sense of worth becomes tethered to someone else's approval. When you finally stop chasing, something remarkable occurs. Absence, once feared, becomes a mirror. In the quiet space you create, they are confronted with a reality they may have never truly considered. The reality that your presence is not infinite, that your energy is not boundless, that your attention is not theirs to take without reciprocity. And in that confrontation, the truth surfaces. They begin to see what they overlooked, what they took for granted, and what they may have dismissed in their comfort. This is not a story about revenge, nor about manipulation. It is about the natural psychology of human connection. Attention is a form of power, pursuit is a reflection of desire, and withdrawal is a revelation. When you stop chasing, you do not diminish yourself. You illuminate the dynamics of respect, value, and genuine affection that have been operating beneath the surface all along. The person you stop chasing may experience confusion, introspection, or even regret. And whether they act upon it or not is irrelevant. The key is that you have reclaimed your autonomy, your focus, and your dignity. For years, many of us have misunderstood the principle of attraction. We believe that persistence equates to loyalty, and that relentless effort will inevitably result in reciprocation. But the reality is more subtle, more psychologically profound. True desire, genuine respect, and authentic connection cannot be forced. They emerge only when individuals recognize each other as equals, when effort is balanced and presence is valued. And often it takes stepping back, withdrawing attention, and ceasing the chase for the other person to truly understand what they have been overlooking. Stopping the chase is not a sign of defeat. It is a declaration of self-respect. It is an acknowledgement that your energy, your focus, and your time are finite resources, deserving of reciprocity. And it is the first step toward a life where relationships are not about dependency or validation, but about mutual recognition, respect, and authentic connection. Ladies and gentlemen, in the moments that follow this realization, there is a profound shift. Not only does the other person begin to see the value they once ignored, but you also begin to perceive yourself with clarity, your strengths, your boundaries, and your worth. And in this clarity, true freedom emerges, the freedom to love wisely, to invest meaningfully, and to pursue growth without losing yourself in the pursuit of someone who will not meet you halfway. This speech will explore that journey, the psychology of pursuit and withdrawal, the dynamics of respect and attention, and the transformative power that arises when you finally choose yourself over the chase. Choosing yourself. First is not an act of selfishness, it is an act of recognition. Recognition of your own value, your own boundaries, and your own psychological well-being. Many people go through life believing that giving endlessly, sacrificing endlessly, and chasing endlessly is a demonstration of love or loyalty. We are taught that effort equates to worth, that attention equals affection, and that persistence will inevitably bring the desired outcome. But human relationships are far more subtle and intricate than these simplistic equations. They are not markets where effort can be exchanged for commitment. They are ecosystems of mutual respect, emotional balance, and reciprocal recognition. When you devote yourself excessively to someone who does not reciprocate, something insidious begins to happen. Your identity starts to fragment. You measure your self-worth through the lens of their reactions. Their validation becomes the barometer of your value. And in doing so, you begin to prioritize their needs, moods, and presence above your own. You stop asking yourself fundamental questions. What do I need? What boundaries must I enforce? What energy is mine to give? And what must I preserve for myself? The act of stopping the chase, of stepping back, is a reclamation of the answers to these questions. It is the assertion that your emotional life is your responsibility first and foremost. Psychologically, prioritizing yourself creates a shift in your internal hierarchy of value. When someone has conditioned you to believe that your happiness is secondary to their attention or approval, chasing them reinforces an internal belief system of inadequacy. Every ignored message, every delayed response, every moment of indifference chips away at your self-esteem, often imperceptibly, until the pattern feels normal. By choosing yourself, you disrupt this pattern. You declare to your own mind and to the world that your time, energy, and attention are not unlimited resources to be spent at the discretion of another. You are worthy of being treated with reciprocity. You are worthy of presence, respect, and genuine interest. This act of self-prioritization also has a profound effect on your emotional resilience. When you chase someone, you are emotionally reactive. Every perceived slight, every moment of disinterest triggers anxiety, self-doubt, and overanalysis. Your emotional state becomes contingent upon the behaviors and moods of another. In contrast, when you stop chasing, you cultivate emotional independence. You learn to anchor your sense of self in your own actions, values, and intentions rather than in the unpredictable responses of someone else. This does not mean you become cold or indifferent. It means you reclaim the power to determine your own emotional equilibrium. Another critical aspect of choosing yourself first is the clarity it brings to your relational perception. When you are no longer chasing, the behaviors of the other person are revealed without distortion. You can observe their interest or lack thereof without the lens of hope or desperation clouding your judgment. Patterns that were once invisible become apparent. Subtle disinterest, inconsistent affection, and unreciprocated effort stand out starkly against the backdrop of your newly prioritized self. This clarity allows you to make informed decisions, to stay if mutuality exists, or to move on if it does not. It prevents wasted time and emotional energy on illusions of connection. Self-prioritization is also an act of psychological modeling. Humans respond to signals, often unconsciously. When you demonstrate that your well-being, focus, and energy are not at the mercy of another, you set a standard both for yourself and for others. You signal that respect and attention are earned, not assumed. This shift can recalibrate relational dynamics. The other person may begin to recognize the value they once overlooked. They may feel curiosity, admiration, or even regret. But even if they do not, your stance is not contingent upon their reaction. The priority is your own integrity and self-respect, not the outcome of their acknowledgement. Finally, choosing yourself is a lesson in long-term emotional investment. Life is finite and attention is precious. Every moment spent chasing someone who will not meet you halfway is a moment lost to growth, joy, and self-realization. By stepping back, you redirect that attention toward pursuits that nourish your mind, body, and spirit. You invest in people who reflect your value, in activities that challenge and fulfill you, and in experiences that expand your horizons. This is not merely practical, it is profoundly transformative. It reshapes your internal narrative, replacing dependency with agency, desire with discernment, and anxiety with purpose. To stop chasing is to acknowledge a fundamental truth about human relationships. You cannot control the feelings, priorities, or behaviors of another, but you can control the way you respond. You can choose to protect your emotional health, honor your boundaries, and cultivate self-respect. This is the essence of self-prioritization, a practice that strengthens the mind, stabilizes the heart, and empowers the soul. It is a declaration that your value is inherent, not conditional, that your attention is precious, not disposable, and that your life is meant to be guided by conscious choice, not by reactive pursuit. In the final analysis, when you stop chasing, you are not giving up on love, connection, or relationships. You are giving yourself the gift of autonomy, clarity, and dignity. You are learning that the greatest act of wisdom and courage in any relationship is to ensure that you are never the last priority. And in that act, you not only reclaim yourself, but you create the conditions for healthier, more balanced, and more meaningful connections in every aspect of your life. Absence is one of the most powerful forces in human psychology, yet it is also one of the most misunderstood. We often think that presence, attention, and pursuit are the ultimate measures of care and connection, but in truth, absence can reveal truths that presence alone cannot. When you stop chasing someone, you create a space in which reality can finally make itself known. That space is not empty, it is charged with clarity, reflection, and revelation. It forces both parties, you and the other person, to confront what has been operating beneath the surface all along. When you are constantly present in someone's life, it is easy for them to take your energy for granted. The constant availability becomes a background expectation rather than a conscious appreciation. Human beings, for all their complexity, often operate on the principle of familiarity. What is always there is rarely noticed. We do not always value what does not seem scarce. When you withdraw your chase, when you create absence, you introduce scarcity not as manipulation, but as a natural signal. Scarcity in this sense is not about deprivation. It is about revealing the truth of mutual interest and the depth of recognition. Psychologically, absence acts as a mirror. In the mirror of your withdrawal, the other person begins to see what they have overlooked or ignored. The behaviors that once seemed inconsequential now carry weight. The subtle moments of carelessness, the hesitation to engage, the inability to meet effort with effort. All of these patterns stand in stark relief when the chasing stops. They are illuminated against the quiet backdrop of your absence, and for many, this illumination is jarring. They realize, perhaps for the first time, the true value of what they have taken for granted. Absence also provokes introspection. When the constant presence of another is removed, the mind begins to fill the void with reflection. Questions emerge: do I truly care? Have I been attentive enough? Have I responded with sincerity? Even if these questions are fleeting or subconscious, they represent a confrontation with reality that cannot be achieved while the other person is chasing, accommodating, or compromising themselves to maintain connection. In essence, absence creates a psychological tension that demands self-awareness. At the same time, absence fosters independence. The person who is no longer being chased must face the reality of their feelings without relying on external validation. This is a critical lesson in emotional maturation. People often mistake attention for love, presence for loyalty, and persistence for desire. By withdrawing your pursuit, you force the other person to differentiate between comfort and true connection, between habit and genuine care, between dependency and authentic desire. This differentiation is psychologically uncomfortable, yet necessary for growth. For you, absence is equally instructive. When you stop chasing, you learn the value of your own attention and the boundaries that protect it. You realize that your energy is finite, and that investing it in someone who does not reciprocate is not generosity, but depletion. This recognition is not merely practical, it is profoundly philosophical. It teaches you that relationships must be reciprocal, that effort must be balanced, and that the measure of connection is not how much you give, but how mutually the giving and receiving occur. There is also a subtle shift in power dynamics when absence is introduced. Pursuit often signals emotional dependence and, unintentionally, lowers perceived value in the eyes of the other. Withdrawal, however, demonstrates self-respect, autonomy, and emotional resilience. This does not mean playing games or seeking revenge. It means consciously aligning your behavior with your own priorities and integrity. In doing so, you not only reclaim your own agency, but you also create the conditions in which the other person is compelled to confront their own motivations and feelings. The mirror of absence can reveal painful truths. Perhaps they were never as invested as you imagined. Perhaps their affection was conditional, inconsistent, or performative. Perhaps they have relied on your chasing to feel secure while withholding commitment. These realizations, while difficult, are invaluable. They prevent further emotional depletion and allow you to engage in relationships with eyes wide open. The absence you create is not a punishment. It is a natural lens through which truth is revealed. Furthermore, absence allows for emotional recalibration on both sides. The distance encourages self-reflection, prioritization, and clarity of intent. The one who withdrew gains perspective on their own needs and boundaries. The one who is left to reckon with your absence gains perspective on their own feelings, intentions, and capacity for genuine connection. This dual process is the essence of psychological insight. In relational dynamics, clarity emerges when the noise of constant pursuit and availability is removed. Ultimately, absence is a teaching mechanism. It communicates that your presence is valuable, that your attention is not infinite, and that relationships are measured not by who chases more, but by mutual recognition and effort. It exposes hidden truths, illuminates emotional realities, and fosters the growth of both parties. Without absence, these lessons remain concealed, buried beneath routine and habituation. When you stop chasing, you do not manipulate, you reveal. You do not punish, you educate. You do not abandon, you clarify. And in that revelation, both you and the other person gain an opportunity. One to understand what truly matters, one to recognize what has been overlooked, and one to confront the reality that must exist before any meaningful connection can occur. Human relationships operate on subtle dynamics, many of which we rarely perceive consciously. Among the most important of these dynamics is the interplay between pursuit and withdrawal, between attention, absence, between effort and recognition. When you chase someone relentlessly, you are participating in a psychological exchange that is often imbalanced. Chasing signals desire, yes, but it also signals dependency, need, and a willingness to subordinate your own priorities for another. The act itself, even when motivated by care or love, creates a power dynamic, one in which the person being chased unconsciously holds the advantage, and you, the pursuer, bear the weight of expectation, hope, and emotional labor. This dynamic is rarely recognized because it is invisible until it is broken. Pursuit feels natural. We are culturally and emotionally conditioned to believe that persistence equals virtue, that effort equals commitment, and that sacrifice is a moral good. But persistence, when it becomes habitual rather than mutual, carries a hidden cost. It distorts perception, clouds judgment, and suppresses insight. The more you chase, the less you see the true value of the person you are chasing, and the less you see the truth about yourself. You begin to measure worth in response instead of substance. You invest energy where it is not reciprocated, and slowly, almost imperceptibly, your emotional economy becomes bankrupt. When you stop chasing, the power dynamics shift immediately and dramatically. Withdrawal is not aggression. It is not manipulation. It is the reassertion of autonomy. By removing the relentless pursuit, you reclaim authority over your own emotional resources. You signal, consciously or unconsciously, that your presence, attention, and care are not unlimited commodities to be taken for granted. This shift forces the other person to confront an internal question they may have avoided. Do I truly value this person, or have I been comfortable with their sacrifice? It introduces a subtle but undeniable force of reality into the relational equation. The psychology of chasing and withdrawal also reveals patterns of respect and desire that are otherwise hidden. When pursuit is continuous, it often masks the true level of interest from the other party. People respond to effort, habit, and consistency, but this response is not always genuine engagement. When you step back, the authentic level of attention and care becomes visible. interest that was previously unnoticed or suppressed emerges, while indifference or disinterest is no longer obscured. The withdrawal acts as a psychological litmus test, demonstrating whether the connection is mutual, conditional, or unbalanced. Chasing can also distort self-perception. When you devote attention disproportionately to someone else, your sense of self often becomes tethered to their reactions. Your emotions, decisions, and even your daily life become reactive. This is a subtle form of self-suppression, where you unconsciously prioritize their presence over your own clarity and well-being. Withdrawal restores balance. It reminds you that your emotional state is not dependent on someone else's behavior. It restores agency and places the locus of control firmly back in your hands. The shift in power dynamics is not merely external, it is internal and deeply psychological. By stepping back, you cultivate emotional resilience, independence, and clarity. You break the cycle of reactive attachment and begin to act from intentionality rather than compulsion. You learn that the measure of your worth is not in how much you give or chase, but in your ability to maintain boundaries, preserve self-respect, and invest energy wisely. These lessons are invaluable for personal growth because they teach the subtle art of relational integrity, that one cannot demand respect through pursuit, but can command it through presence, boundaries, and self-prioritization. Chasing also affects the perception of desire. Psychological research and human observation consistently show that scarcity increases perceived value. When attention is constant, it can paradoxically diminish attraction. The act of stopping the chase introduces a natural scarcity that allows the other person to reevaluate what they have been taking for granted. It is not manipulation in the negative sense, it is the revealing of truth through absence. People are drawn to what they perceive as finite and meaningful, and stepping back forces authenticity to surface. Moreover, stopping the chase allows patterns of mutual recognition to emerge. It teaches both parties to recognize what is genuine and what is performative. When attention is withdrawn, the unconscious habits of the other person are revealed. Are they motivated by authentic care or by comfort? Are they willing to invest themselves in reciprocity, or have they relied on your persistence to maintain the connection without effort of their own? The answers become evident when the chase ends, and these insights are critical for making informed decisions about who is worthy of ongoing emotional investment. Finally, the shift in dynamics fosters transformation. The person who stops chasing gains self-respect, clarity, and emotional autonomy. They learn that relationships are not won through desperation, but through balanced effort and mutual recognition. They cultivate the courage to prioritize themselves without guilt, and to recognize that withdrawal is not rejection, but a necessary condition for both self-preservation and relational honesty. The other person confronted with absence may experience realization, regret, or renewed awareness, but whatever the outcome, the truth is revealed. In the end, the psychology of chasing and withdrawal teaches a profound lesson. Power in relationships is not held through pursuit or sacrifice, but through autonomy, self-respect, and intentional action. By stopping the chase, you do not diminish care or affection. You illuminate the realities of connection, value, and desire. You create space for truth, for clarity, and for meaningful reciprocal relationships to exist. And in that space, both individuals have the opportunity to see themselves and each other more clearly than ever before. Emotional clarity is one of the most profound gifts that emerges when you stop chasing someone. For many, the act of pursuit clouds perception. When you invest incessantly in another person, your mind begins to distort reality in subtle ways. You convince yourself of signals that aren't there, interpret indifference as temporary hesitation, and justify patterns of inconsistency as minor flaws. The energy you devote to maintaining attention, connection, and presence often becomes a lens through which the other person is idealized. In this lens, hope masquerades as truth, desire is confused with loyalty and emotional turbulence, is rationalized as part of love. Stepping back allows the fog to lift. In the absence of your relentless pursuit, patterns that were once blurred become visible in sharp relief. Actions that seemed insignificant or harmless reveal themselves for what they are, either authentic expressions of care or indicators of indifference. The other person's engagement, or lack thereof, is no longer filtered through the desperation of attention-seeking. It stands on its own, unmasked, uncompromised, and undeniable. This clarity is not only revealing but liberating. It frees you from the psychological trap of interpreting the world according to what you wish to see, rather than what is objectively present. This process of emotional clarity also prompts self-reflection. When you stop chasing, you are no longer entangled in the reactive cycle of hope, disappointment, and anxiety. You gain the mental space to ask difficult questions. Why was I pursuing this person so relentlessly? What did I hope to achieve? What patterns of thought or behavior have kept me trapped in this cycle? These questions, though uncomfortable, are essential for understanding your own motivations. Often, pursuit is less about the other person and more about filling gaps in one's own sense of worth, security, or identity. Withdrawal forces acknowledgement of this truth. Another critical dimension of emotional clarity is the insight it provides into boundaries. For years, many people operate under invisible rules. They suppress their needs, tolerate disrespect, and overextend themselves because they believe that love demands sacrifice without reciprocity. When you cease the chase, you are confronted with the consequences of those unexamined patterns. You see clearly where you have been giving too much, expecting too little in return, and compromising your integrity. This awareness is profoundly educational. It teaches that boundaries are not arbitrary restrictions, but essential instruments for sustaining mental and emotional health. By establishing and maintaining these boundaries, you reclaim autonomy, dignity, and the capacity to engage in relationships without losing yourself. Clarity also emerges in the recognition of relational authenticity. Many times, the behavior of the person being chased is inconsistent, ambiguous, or performative. While chasing, these contradictions can be rationalized away. But when pursuit stops, the authenticity of the other person becomes apparent. Their investment, or lack thereof, is visible. Their consistency, or absence of it, is undeniable. This is the moment when illusions dissolve. You see the person not as you wish them to be, but as they truly are, and this perception is foundational for informed, healthy decisions regarding the relationship. Psychologically, this moment of